We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zara Daf 56b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing our Mishnah, which says that it only becomes wine in terms of yayin nesech when the wine actually enters into the bore, into the cistern. And the Gemara asked, does that mean there's a three-way machlokas tanoim? Because when it comes to wine in terms of when it's considered wine to be meiser, we have two different opinions. And the Gemara said it could be that by yayin nesech we are stricter, and that's why we say it's already considered wine when it enters the bore. And the Gemara continues now and says, well, the Rava, now according to Rava, the lo shanile, he does not make a distinction between yayin nesech and between when it's considered wine for meiser. So mukim le kitlasa tanoi, he will say that it's a three-way machlokas tanoim. And Rashi explains, Rava de lo shanile, according to Rava, who does not make a distinction, mido sivna le'el meiser yayin nesech, from the fact that he asked a question from meiser on yayin nesech, the masnis, in the case of yayin nesech in our Mishnah, v'shan Rava lo kash, and Rava answered it's not difficult, etc. Alma lo shanile, we see that he doesn't make a distinction. He says that when it's considered wine for meiser, that's the same time it's considered wine as far as yayin nesech. Di shanile, because if he did make a distinction, leima shani yayin nesech ta'achmiru be'rabbanan, he should have said yayin nesech is different because the Rabbanan are strict by yayin nesech. So al karchach muki lo kitzlasa tanoi, you have to say according to Rava that he says there's a three-way machlokas tanoim. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Masha bebor asur, whatever is in the cistern is going to be forbidden, meaning that's considered wine as far as yayin nesech is concerned, and therefore if it belongs to the idolater, it's going to be forbidden. V'hashar mutter, and the rest is going to be mutter, meaning anything that has not yet entered the bore. Let's say, for example, it's still in the wine press, so then it is going to be mutter, it will be permitted. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna says, Lo shanu elish lo hechzer gargusni lagas. This is only true if they didn't return the strainer to the wine press. Aval hechzer gargusni lagas asr, but if they return the strainer to the wine press, so then it is forbidden. And Rashi explains, Gargusni husal gadol. Gargusni was like a big basket. Shekasher betziner was tied onto the pipe which the wine was flowing through. V'hayayin yored min hatziner lesocho, and the wine would go down from the pipe into this basket, which was like a strainer. Umitocho lebor, and then it would go through the strainer into the bore, into the cistern. Kedei lasanin hayayin mizogin v'chartzon, and that was in order to strain the wine from the grapes, from the grape skins, and from the grape pits. And so therefore, Rav Huna is saying that if they then return those, let's say there was some stuff that was strained into the basket, there were grape pits, there were grape skins that were in the basket, and they want to return that to the wine press because they want to get more wine out of it, so then also it's going to be forbidden, af masha begas. Now everything, even everything within the wine press is going to be forbidden, because now already you have this mixture of that which was in the gargusni is now in the gas. If you have a mixture of wine that's yayin nesech with other wine, so then you're going to have a problem that the entire thing is going to be yayin nesech. And the Gemara continues and asks, Gargusni gufa, but the strainer itself, b'mai kamitzera, how did it become forbidden? Because again, the Mishnah said it only becomes forbidden when it actually enters the cistern. And the Gargusni is one step before the cistern. That's the strainer that it goes through before it gets into the cistern. So why is it even that anything in the Gargusni is going to be forbidden? And the Gemara suggests, benitzok, so maybe we'll suggest that it's because if it's pouring straight through, so then we say that something pouring, even though it's in a downward motion, it's going down into the pit, but anything connecting upwards is going to be a problem. The Rishonim do discuss, if we're going to say there's an idea of nitzok, then we should say the entire wine press is forbidden because of nitzok, and the Rishonim describe various ways that this was arranged, that it's not a problem of nitzok in the wine press itself, but in any case, the Gemara is now suggesting that that's why the gargusni is usher, because of nitzok. Rashi explains, benitzok kiluach hayored mi gargusni labor. It's the stream that is flowing from the gargusni into the cistern, and that's like a connection between the gargusni to the yayin nesech that's in the cistern. So again, it would seem to be that it's through nitzok. So shma mino nitzok chibur, should we learn from this that nitzok, that if you have this connection of a flow, that that's considered to be a connection? The problem with saying that, says Rashi, is shma mino nitzok chibur ulakamon ba'asocher sapoel, later on in hasocher sapoel pligiba, that's going to be a machlokus whether nitzok is considered to be a chibur or not. And the Gemara continues and says that it's not necessarily through nitzok that the gargusni is usher, rather it's kedetani Rav Chia, it's like Rav Chia taught in a different context. Shepechasatu tzluchiso, it's talking about where the level in the flask, in this case we're talking about a funnel, and it's going down the funnel into a flask, and pechasatu tzluchiso means that the level of the wine in the flask has actually reached the bottom of the funnel, so it's actually touching the funnel. That's why it's forbidden. It has nothing to do with nitzok, rather it's actually touching it. Hachanami shepechasatu boro. Here also, we're going to say that the level of the wine in the cistern has actually gone up to the level where it's actually touching the gargusni, and that's why the gargusni is aser. And Rashi explains, Shepechasatu tzluchiso lekamon ba'asocher, that's later on. Shepechasatu boro means shenismale habor ad shehigia hayayin v'tofach b'shulei hagargusni. The cistern filled up that the level of the wine has now reached the bottom of the gargusni, and so therefore that's really the reason why the gargusni is usher. And again, if you're then going to return the contents of the gargusni to the wine press, that's going to make the whole wine press forbidden. And the Gemara continues, Ahu Yenuka detona avodas kochavim b'shis sheni. There was a child that learned Meseches Avodah Zara at 6 years old. Rashi says b'shis shenin, ben shei shanim, he was just 6 years old, and he was an expert in Meseches Avodah Zara. Bo minei, they asked him the following question. Ma'u lidroch ima ovet kochavim begas. What's the halacha in terms of treading on the grapes and the wine press together with the idolater? Amar Lahu, he said to them, Dorchin im ha'ovet kochavim begas. We are allowed to tread with the idolater in the wine press. The Gemara says, they asked the child, but isn't the idolater going to do a libation with his hand? He'll pick up some of the wine and he'll pour it for his Avodah Zara, so it's going to be a problem of yayin nesech. Rashi explains, Mishnah Achrona Katani, again in the second version or the latter version of the Mishnah we learned, that Chazru Lomar Ein Dorchen, that they said, you're not allowed to tread on the grapes with the Ovid Kochavim, to Svira like Rav Huna, because we hold like Rav Huna, to Mishahischel Limoshe Chaviyayin, that it's already considered wine from the time it starts to flow out of the wine press to the bore. It doesn't have to actually reach the bore. Even when it starts flowing, it's considered to be wine, and so therefore it should be a problem to tread together with the Ovid Kochavim in the gas. And the Gemara continues that the child answered that Sayrna Luhu Liyade, that we're talking in a situation where you just tie his hands. If you tie his hands, then he can't pour with his hands, he can't worship the Avodah Zara, and it won't be a problem. But the Gemara says, beregel, but isn't he going to do a libation with his foot? And so therefore they asked the child, that should be a problem. And to that the child said, Nisuch deregel lo shmei nisuch. If he's pouring a libation to Avodah Zara with his foot, that's not called a libation, that is not an issue. And the Gemara continues, there was a case in Nahardoi, the Doshu Yisrael, V'ovet Kochavim Lahu Chamra, that a Jew and an Ovet Kochavim, they treaded upon this kind of wine. V'shaye Shmuel to Losa Wrigley, and Shmuel delayed in answering the question for 3 regalim. My time, and the Gemara says, what's the reason for that? What's the reason for the delay? Ilema mishum de kasavar, if you're going to say it's because he held, and Rashi explains, Telos Wrigley, shayu miskabtzin l'shmo adrasha, hilchas Pesach b'Pesach, hilchas Atzeres b'Atzeres, hilchas Chag b'Chag. They used to gather to hear drasha. They would hear the laws of Pesach on Pesach. They would hear Atzeres on Atzeres. That's Shavuos on Shavuos, and they would hear the halachas of Chag, of Sukkos on Sukkos. And so again, he delayed for 3 regalim, and the Gemara wants to understand why, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Zayin Amud Aleph.